Well, good morning. This is Barry Odell with the Church of Christ at Mammoth Spring Facebook page. Glad to see everybody joining on. Hey, Brian, Marissa, Mom, and Wayne. Glad to see you guys on here today and others who are on the stream. As always, if you have questions or comments while we're going today, use our comment section here. Let's see. Hey, Diane and Connie. Lyle, good to see everybody joining on. All right, we are in Matthew chapter 15 today. Going through Matthew's gospel, like I told you, we kind of skipped over the parables because I did that recently, so we've moved on a little quickly. And that'll continue to happen through our study of Matthew's gospel. But we're ready for chapter 15 today. Matthew, of course, is focusing on Jesus as the Christ, presenting him as the son of David, who is the son of Abraham. Matthew chapter 1 and verse 1. Hey, Mr. Raymond. And so Matthew is recording the teachings of Christ, the parables of Christ, the miracles of Christ, all of these different, not just his teachings, but also his activities. Hey, Miss Sharon. So we are ready for chapter 15 today, where we have another confrontation with the scribes and Pharisees in the first 20 verses. And this is all about tradition versus commandment. Now, the Bible talks about tradition in two different ways. Negatively, obviously, what we're going to deal with here today, but also there are traditions that are good. Hey, Derek. There are traditions that are good and that should be observed. 2 Thessalonians 2 and verse 15, Paul talks about the traditions that had been handed down. There are things that were inspired traditions, if you will, that originated with Christ, originated with the apostles. Those are traditions that we need to keep. But here, when we're looking at Matthew 15, we have a distinction drawn between a commandment of God versus a tradition of man. And there's a major difference there. There are inspired traditions, and we should keep those. But then there are traditions that are neither in and of themselves right or wrong, but the way we hold to them may make them wrong, and that's what we have happening here. So the scribes and Pharisees who were from Jerusalem came to Jesus saying, "Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders?" That's our key phrase here. They're not transgressing the word of God. They're not committing sin. They're transgressing a tradition of the elders, for they do not wash their hands when they eat. So that sets the context for this confrontation here. And he turns it immediately. Jesus doesn't pull any punches particularly with the scribes and Pharisees, these religious elites that are constantly questioning him about his education and his methods and things like this. So he turns it on them. Why do you transgress the commandment of God because of your tradition? So which is superior? Traditions of men or the Word of God? I've got a book in my library. I think it was written by Alvin Jennings called Traditions of Men versus the Word of God. Pretty interesting little book. Well, what is he talking about here? God commanded, honor your father and mother. That's Exodus chapter 20 and verse 12, one of the 10 commandments. And he who curses father and mother, let him be put to death. But you say, whoever says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me is a gift from God, then he need not honor his father and mother. And so you have transgressed, or you have made the commandment of God of no effect by your tradition. Mark records this also in Mark chapter 7. One thing that we see for the Pharisees and the scribes throughout the gospel accounts in their dealings with Jesus is their willingness to make loopholes for themselves in the law. So again, the law said, honor your father and mother. Well, they had created this loophole where, hey, Miss Louise, where they would take whatever they might have used or been able to use to take care of an aging parent, and they would set that off to the side and say, listen, I can't help you. I've already dedicated this money to God. And that appears, oh, you dedicated that to God. Man, you're holy. You're righteous. That's the appearance of it. But they were transgressing a direct command from God to honor one of their so-called traditions. That money or that property, whatever they had, that could have been used to take care of their parents, they, it was still in their control. They could do whatever they wanted to do with that money. But to avoid using their money on somebody else, they said, well, this is dedicated to God. We learn a lot about the Pharisees in the Gospels. One of the things we learn about them, I'm turning over here, I think I know where I'm going. Yeah, Luke 16 and verse 14 tells us that the Pharisees were lovers of money. These were greedy, covetous people, and they would willingly transgress God's expressly stated commandment to honor some tradition that they had set up themselves. That just shows you what kind of people the Pharisees were. And so Jesus calls them hypocrites, and he quotes Isaiah to them. They draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. The idea, hey, Mr. Danny, the idea there being, you can claim that you are a follower of God. You can claim that you are a Christian all day long. You can say it. You can speak it. But if your actions don't match up with your claim, what Jesus tells us here is your heart is far from him. Teaching as in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. And so he rebukes the Pharisees, but then he talks to the surrounding multitude, and he tells them or instructs them in the way that it ought to be. The Pharisees were worried about, well, if you eat with dirty hands, you ingest something and you've not washed your hands, then you've become defiled. They have it completely backwards. And that's what Jesus deals with here in verses 11 through 20. It's not what goes in that defiles a man. It's what comes out of a man, because, let's see here. Okay, verse 18. But those things which proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile a man. So the Pharisees had it flipped around. They had it backwards. It's not just about going through the motions. It's about doing it the right way and for the right reason. Hey, Diana, good to see you. That's why they're hypocritical. That's why they're rebuked here. And he points out here in Matthew 15 and verse 13 that they will be uprooted and that they are blind leaders of the blind, and they're going to fall into a ditch. Jesus was very rough. I guess that's the best way to put it. He was very rough on these religious leaders because they were hypocritical. They would, again, as I said earlier, they would willfully violate an express command of God to keep a tradition that they had established. We don't need to be that way, obviously. And then Jesus concludes by saying, these are the things which defile a man, the things that originate within the heart and then come out in whether the mouth or the hands or whatever. These are the things which defile a man, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile a man. It may not be the best for your health, but it's not going to harm you spiritually. And Pharisees apparently didn't understand that. I've got a note here in the margin of my Bible, going back up to verse 12. Jesus has just rebuked the Pharisees publicly. Verse 12, then his disciples came and said to him, do you not know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying? That same kind of, I don't know if I should use the word attitude or response, maybe that's the best way to put it, but that kind of thing still exists today, where you might speak something that is true and it might offend some people, and then other Christians will come along and say, hey, you don't need to do that. You need to be a little more gentle with people. Don't be so offensive. And it's like you're being attacked by a person who should be supporting you. The disciples had no right to come and do this. The fact of the matter is this. The truth is going to offend people who do not love the truth. Or the truth will offend people who do not know the truth. It may not be that they don't love it. Maybe they're searching for it. And maybe when they hear it for the first time, that's shocking. That's offensive to them. Well, I don't need other Christians to tell me, hey, you don't need to speak about this because you're going to offend somebody. Jesus didn't need that. The Christian today doesn't need that. Sometimes it's almost like some of our fellow Christians are fighting against us in a way, rebuking. It's happened to me with the stuff I do online sometimes, with videos. The truth is going to offend people. Now, our intent is not to be offensive. We don't, the Christian's not going to set out to, man, I hope I hurt somebody's feelings today. I hope I offend somebody. That's not, and if that is your goal, if that is a Christian's goal, they've got the wrong goal. They've got the wrong motivation. They're doing it all wrong. But the fact of the matter is this: the truth will offend people who either don't know the truth or who don't love the truth. And I don't need anybody apologizing for me. You as a Christian, you don't need anybody apologizing for you for speaking the truth. We need to think about that. That's just one of those incidental things that I pick up here in the text. Another time this happens, you can read John chapter 6, where Jesus talks about some quote-unquote offensive things, and his disciples pointed out to him again. Many of his followers quit following him, and he turned to the 12 and said, "Are you going to leave too?" He didn't apologize for saying what needed to be said, and we shouldn't do that either. And we don't need our quote-unquote fellow Christians apologizing for the truth either. Anyway, some traditions are good, some traditions are bad, and the Pharisees chose the bad ones. Okay, we have a miracle beginning in verse 21. Jesus went out from there and departed to the region of Tyre and Sidon. Tyre and Sidon, if you were looking at a biblical map, they are far north on the Mediterranean Sea in the land of Palestine, up right on the seacoast of the Mediterranean Sea, Gentile lands. A woman of Canaan came from that region. Mark gives us a little more detail. A Syrophoenician woman, she's a Gentile. Mark 7:26 tells us that. But notice how she addresses Jesus. "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David." That's an interesting title, description for a Gentile woman to use. I mean, this is what a Jew would think of when they think of the Messiah, because they knew the lineage of the Messiah, that he was a son of David. But this is a Gentile woman saying this. So I guess it'd be speculation, how did she know him? How did she know how to call him that? Things of this nature. Anyway, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely demon-possessed." But he answered her not a word. And I think what we're doing here, I think there's a lesson being taught here to Jesus's disciples. Because his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she cries out after us." Maybe they were thinking, hey, listen, just give her what she wants and she'll leave us alone. Or maybe they were thinking, get her out of here, she's bothering us. But I think the way Jesus handles her is a lesson for his disciples. He answered and said, "I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Well, the Jews had first right to hear the gospel. We talked about that back in Matthew chapter 10 with the limited commission. He sent the 12 out to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So that was his mission. But we do know that he talked to Gentiles. He talked to Samaritans, things of this nature. Then she came and worshipped him, saying, "Lord, help me." This woman knows that he is the solution to the problem. And again, I think what he's doing here is more for his disciples than for her. So he says, "It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs." Now that was literally the view that the Jews had of Gentiles. They were no better than dogs. Now listen, you and I in 21st century America, our dogs are our children, okay, and grandchildren. We love them. We talk to them. Frankly, there are dogs in our culture that live better than some humans do. That wasn't so back in this day. To them, dogs were nasty, scavengers, filthy animals. So his response to her, "It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to little dogs." I'm not going to waste time on a Gentile. Well, she said to him, "Yes, Lord, but even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table." She's expressing her faith here in Jesus Christ as the Son of David, as the Messiah. And again, I think his words here of the dog and him not answering her is not for her. I think it's for his disciples because they said, "Listen, get her out of here." Well, he responds to her statement, "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be to you as you desire." And her daughter was healed from that very hour. Pretty interesting miracle. But I think it has a teaching aspect to it. It's not just that he's performing a miracle here, which he does. It has a teaching aspect for the benefit of his disciples. Just like John chapter 4, where he's talking to the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. And when you remember when his disciples came back, they were Why in the world is he talking to her? She was even shocked by it. Well, he used opportunities like that to teach, and I think that's what we're dealing with here. He wasn't calling her a dog to insult her, but to teach something. So he heals her daughter. Demon-possessed, by the way. And we've talked about that quite a bit through Matthew so far. Verse 29 beginning, we have another of the group healings, if you will. Jesus departed from there, skirted the Sea of Galilee, and went up on the mountain and sat down there. Then great multitudes came to him, having with them the lame, blind, mute, maimed, and many others. And they laid them down at Jesus' feet, and he healed them. Implication is he healed whoever was brought to him. So the multitudes marveled when they saw the mute speaking, the maimed made whole. Maimed means you were missing a limb. Okay? One example that I think of is Malchus in John chapter 18. You remember one of the Roman guards that came to arrest Jesus. Peter cut his ear off. Jesus restored it. That's what it means to be. That's what it means to be maimed. He healed them, and they glorified the God of Israel. Again, that was the purpose of miracles. It was to produce faith in the witnesses. Verse 32, we have a second miracle of Jesus feeding a large group of people. He sees this multitude, says, I have compassion on the multitude because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. He's been teaching them. He's been performing miracles. Now he's going to feed them. You know, there's actually a segment, and this is pretty pathetic, I got to tell you. There's actually a segment within the churches of Christ that believes we shouldn't help anybody with food. Our mission is solely spiritual, and if they want to get some food, they can go to a food bank somewhere. So that's one extreme. There's another view that some people have that you can't take money out of the church treasury and help a non-Christian. You can do it as an individual Christian. You know, if a person holds that view, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that view. But when you look at the action of Jesus, he's helping multitudes of people. And he has compassion on the multitudes, not just his disciples. So he feeds them here. Yeah, and this is what's amazing to me. So he's just fed the 5,000. We read about that back in chapter 14. And again, that's the only miracle that's recorded by all four gospel writers. So now we have 4,000. We have fewer people. He says, I'm going to feed them. And what do the disciples say? Well, where are we going to get all the food? These guys, sometimes they're not picking up what he's laying down. They're a little slow picking it up sometimes. Well, how many loaves do you have? Well, we have 7 and a few little fish. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. He took the 7 loaves and the fish and gave thanks, broke them and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitude. Now listen, verse 37. So they all ate and were filled. The 4,000. Now we know again, verse 38, that was just, the 4,000 number was just the males. That they weren't counting the women and the children, but they all ate and were filled. And they took up 7 large baskets full of fragments that were left. He went away, he sent away the multitude, got into the boat, and came to the region of Magdala. So again, another miracle that shows Jesus' power over nature, his capacity of his ability to, his unlimited ability to provide the needs of people physically. You know, so what I was mentioning earlier, to take that position that the only, so here's how I heard it. I actually heard it expressed. The only work that the church has is evangelism. You know, I'm sure you've heard this before if you're a member of the Church of Christ. Our work is evangelism, benevolence. What's the third one? I just went blank here. Benevolence, evangelism, edification. You know, that's kind of been the thing that's been taught over the years, over the centuries. Benevolence, evangelism, edification. But I actually heard not long ago a preacher talking about this, and he said the only work the church has is evangelism. Well, I have trouble squaring that with the life of Christ. and what he did and the pattern that he set for us. You know, we are told in 1 Peter chapter 2 that he left us an example that we should follow in his footsteps. And we have feeding a large multitude of 5,000, a second large multitude of 4,000. Both of those numbers, only the males. There were women and children present too, but they weren't counted. The power of Jesus is unmistakable. It couldn't be argued against by even his enemies. Something to think about. You know, these miracles, again, IOU, immediate, observable, and undeniable, even by his enemies. All right, so we need to be careful what traditions we hold. There are good ones and there are bad ones. And then we see the miracles of Christ throughout the rest of chapter 15. All right, guys, that's what I've got for today. I don't see any questions or comments. But good to see all of you on here today. Hope you're all doing well. We will come back tomorrow and get into Matthew chapter 16. Man, there's a lot in that chapter. We'll just have to see how it goes. Yeah, Connie says some don't believe in supporting children's homes also. Yeah, there's a variety of beliefs out there. You know, and I suppose if a local congregation, and that's it, every congregation is autonomous, self-governing, and if they decide, listen, we're not going to send our money to a children's home, okay. Are you doing something in your community? Are you doing anything? You know, we need to be sure that that we're doing the work of the Lord. You know, we're supposed to do good unto all men, especially unto those who are of the household of faith, Galatians 6, verse 10. And I know people try to make that apply to just individual Christians. Well, you cannot get around the fact that the book of Galatians was written to the churches of Galatia. You can't. That's unget-overable. That's the reality. That's the broader context of Galatians 6 and verse 10. The church has some great opportunities, and if we have the ability, we have the responsibility to fulfill those needs and help people and hopefully reach them with the gospel. All right, guys, I'm going to quit. Good to see you today. As always, if you have any questions or comments after the live stream's even over, you can put them in the comment section here. Our YouTube channel, I guess that's about it. So you can read ahead of time. You can read Matthew chapter 16. You'll be ready for tomorrow, and I hope to see you back here then. So have a good day.